Hey guys, welcome back. This is Eric Smith, Five Reasons Sports contributor, co-host of the Scouting Combine with Hassan Patel. And in this video, we're going to look at my Week 15 grades for the Miami Dolphins offensive line versus the Houston Texans. And this was a tough all-22 to watch offensively, not just because of the offensive line playing poorly, which they did. It was a poor performance pretty much across the board. The build structure of this team requires high-level play from the tackles, an athletic center, and some guards that you can get by with. It's why you see a team like the 49ers making a move for someone like Trent Williams a priority. And it's also why you see the Dolphins making Teron Armstead one of their first signings after Mike McDaniel was the head coach. We came into this game without our original starting tackles, Teron Armstead and Austin Jackson. And we also were missing the top backup in both of those positions in Kendall Lamb. So what we're left with now is a rookie that we hoped wouldn't even play in 2024, who's now probably the second best lineman available to the team. And he's bookended by a player who was waived by the Bengals after failing as a converted guard as a former second-round pick, and he wasn't claimed by anyone. Miami signed Jackson Carman to the practice squad back in September, and then they elevated him to the active roster earlier this month. But he had never started a game at tackle in the NFL. So expecting even an average performance from the offensive line this week was probably going to be too much to ask. As you can see here, the season average for the offensive line was an 8.39, and the grade for this week's game came in significantly lower at 7.52. They were just outmatched throughout the entire game, both physically and schematically. It just felt like they were playing behind the eight ball the entire game, and it wasn't just the fact that we didn't have our starting offensive tackles. McDaniel was getting out-coached in this game as well, and that showed up in some of the ways that Houston was able to create some mismatches. Looking at the individual grades, as always, you see the players that played. We had 5 guys that played all of the snaps in this game. In parentheses, you can see their season average so far. Jackson Carman obviously not having a grade since this is the first time that he played for Miami this year. The lowest graded individual player in this game, individual offensive lineman, for me was, no surprise, Liam Eichenberg, coming in at a 6.48, which was also his lowest grade of the season. And, I get the Liam Eichenberg hate. Liam Eichenberg was not supposed to be a starter coming into this season. It was supposed to be Isaiah Wynn, who, had some setbacks with his injuries, and Rob Jones, I think, was the guy that they targeted to be the other starting guard. But he's been in the lineup. And I've said this over and over again, if Liam Eichenberg is your worst starter on the offensive line, and that's the one guy that you're trying to scheme around, then you're probably doing okay. And almost every team has that player, right? But for Miami right now, the problem is that Eichenberg is, not clearly the worst player on this offensive line. There's other guys that are, down in the same range as him right now, and that's having a dramatic impact on the overall performance of the offensive line. All right, so as we get into our video portion of Liam Eichenberg, on this first play here, going to be a zone play to the right. And what you'll see out of Eichenberg here is that they start out with a good combination block. Everything's looking solid. Supposed to have Brewer leading up to this linebacker. Ingold's going to the middle. Julian Hill going there. And, Brewer and Ingold, for whatever reason, kind of switch up their assignments, but that's okay. Not a big deal. The issue on this play is that even though the combo starts out well, and, right here, this should be a win 100% of the time, but as Brewer leaves, Eichenberg is not able to stay connected, and that defensive tackle is the one who's able to make that play. Next one for Eichenberg. So, like I said, part of this was schematics, right? And this is an example of where Houston did a good job of getting the matchup they wanted. So when we look at the protection here, there's another defender out here that, could be considered a threat as a pass rusher. So from a called protection standpoint, right, Patrick Paul has got to be aware of that player out there. And if he comes, then Rob Jones has to get out here to number 55, and Aaron Brewer has to get to the defensive tackle here. And that's what you're going to see in this initial set is that everybody's starting out pretty wide. Now, the guys off the edge don't end up coming, and you end up with, three guys on one there because they all went to the left, and only one player came from the left. But when you look at the other side of it too, 51 drops out as well. And it's easy to say that Brewer should have come back and helped Eichenberg, but the problem here is that if this player does come off the edge and Brewer is slow helping Eichenberg over here, he's never going to get to this 4-eye defensive tackle. So, this is an example of where, based on the alignment of that defender out there that was a threat as an edge rusher, Houston was able to dictate the one-on-one matchup that they were going to get with Eichenberg right here, and they're putting him in space, and he just gets beat. No other way to put it, right? He loses the inside leverage with the hands early, right? He's able to just grab his hands and big boy him and throw those hands up and reset his hands inside, and Eichenberg has lost from there. But, definitely a loss by Eichenberg, but also an example of where, a player that we'd like to be able to protect is getting exposed by, the defensive scheme being able to dictate the pass protection. Next one here, this is going to be another zone run. And when you're looking at this here, so in terms of the second level defenders, you're going to have Ingold leading up to 23. The combination block of Jones and Brewer is leading number 48, which should mean that the combination block of Jackson and Eichenberg are leading to 39 here. And you can see that they never get to that. 39 ends up being the one who makes that play. And I don't know if this was a case of Eichenberg just not having confidence in Carman, which is understandable, but at the same time, there's not really any reason to get completely turned around here, right? You can help on that block without completely turning your back to the second level defender you need to get to. And you can see that he's late. His defender's already gone, so he's going to the next guy. But, this is another fail by Eichenberg to execute a combo block and get to the appropriate second level defender. And then last one for Eichenberg here. So this is one that I took a still shot of and, should have been a penalty. This was the sack fumble. I don't put a whole lot on Carman here because he does a pretty good job of running his guy around the edge. And if everything else was good, that guy just continues running around the hoop and never, really sniffs to it. But, this is supposed to be a penalty, hand in the throat, illegal use of hands. I pointed out that this is kind of what you get at times when you have a player like Eichenberg who has short arms. I think his arms are in the 32 and a quarter range, and you're facing somebody who has longer arms. This guy, I think it's Autry, has 34-inch arms, and then you get the whole philosophy of one arm is longer than two, right? He gets the hand up into the throat. And Eichenberg just has no chance from that point. And while this should have been a penalty, at some point you've got to, stop getting your ass kicked and do something about it. And on this rep, Eichenberg just never does that, right? I don't know if it's a panic deal or what, but, we saw in the earlier clip where the defender took Eichenberg's hands and was able to get his hands under Eichenberg's forearms and remove his hands from him. And that's what has to happen here, right? This is obviously an awful place to be, but Eichenberg needs to be able to set his feet back, use that left hand to get into the forearm of Autry and get that hand off of him. That never happens. The hand never comes off, and he ends up walking him all the way back into Tua. So, you know, should have been a penalty, but this is still a awful rep from Eichenberg. All right, moving along. Our next lowest graded player is Jackson Carman, coming in at a 6.71. And this was fairly predictable. Like I said, he'd never played guard or played tackle in the NFL before. You know, first time seeing any kind of significant action in the game, and just not a player that I expected a whole lot of when Miami signed him, other than possibly being a project I felt as a guard for the future. Definitely not somebody that I had any encouragement starting at tackle in 2024, which is what we got. And it wasn't all bad. There was some good stuff from Jackson Carman, but there was also some really bad losses from him in this game. All right, from a film perspective, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on Carman. Like I said, not somebody that I was expecting to start, and somebody that I am hoping does not have to continue to start throughout this season. But one play that I wanted to call out, this is a play called Crunch that we reviewed earlier in the season. Miami's run it a few times, and basically you get both guards pulling, and then your tight end is coming in on a wham block on the defensive tackle here. And not a great block by Julian Hill there. Would like to see him get more movement there. But part of the issue here is that Carman also gets zero movement on this defensive end, which forces Mostert to take a little tighter. You know, better blocks from both of those guys, you know, maybe gives you a play that's got some potential here. But my biggest issue with this was that, you know, Miami ran this not too long before, and Carman had got completely embarrassed by it. So I don't know what Miami saw that first time that they ran it that felt that it was going to be a whole lot better. But, you know, this was just another situation where it felt like, you know, Miami was going to a play that should not be a core concept in your offensive system, right? And expecting good results out of it, and instead getting 2 negative reps out of a concept that should really be one that gets developed once your line has some continuity, which it clearly didn't. Like I said, this is the only clip for Carman that I had. If you go to my Twitter feed, you'll see the one where he got, you know, beat very quickly off the edge on the one that Tua got sacked on, backed up against our goal line there. And there was definitely a lot of other bad reps from Carman, but not going to spend a whole lot of time on him specifically today. All right, coming back over, next player is going to be Patrick Paul, and you can see that his grade of 7.85 comes fairly close to his season average this year. And it wasn't a bad game by Paul. Just like every other performance that he's had this year, there was definitely some stuff to really like from Paul in the game, but you know, there's still some growing pains there. There's still some technique stuff that needs to be cleaned up, and I have confidence that he will. This is still a pretty good grade. You know, the average is for the entire group is right around 8 is where you want to see. So this isn't far off of the average, and you know, hopefully as he continues to develop and we get into next year, we're going to see some of these grades getting up into the 8.5, 9 range for Paul, but that's just not where we are at this juncture. All right, so just a couple videos for Paul here. So on this one, on first look, like this looks like a really good play that Paul is getting out here. He's really opening up that edge. But when we go back and we start talking about the assignments on this play, I believe that the combination of Patrick Paul and Julian Hill should be working up to number 48. The combination block of Rob Jones and Aaron Brewer working up to 39, and 20 I think is just not part of the blocking surface of this as a safety walking up on the backside. I addressed on Twitter, you know, Jonnu getting up there and not touching that defender. You know, maybe Jonnu's responsibility as a safety was kind of back here more so, but I don't really get how you get to that point and don't touch him at all. But if we're looking at Paul specifically, I give him credit in the sense that when we're running outside zone, the running back is reading this defender. And if this defender is, really setting the edge and getting outside there and giving a clear inside cut read, then the running back cuts it up. If Julian Hill is able to work to the outside and Paul is able to take over that block, then we're going to continue this to the outside, which is obviously where Miami wants to get with Achane. And you can see this is still a cloudy read at this point. So I understand Paul sticking with that and spilling him over. But, where I question it is, did Paul, overextend on that to the degree that it sacrificed his ability, right there, right? Sacrificed his ability and balance to be able to just stop and wall this defender off, leaving that lane open right where Paul is standing right now. And this is something that Teron Armstead does really well, that he's able to reach that spot very quickly and spill that defender over and still have the balance to turn around and seal number 48 in this type of example. So, not a huge negative from Paul here, but when we talk about places that we want to see him continue to grow, this is an opportunity where, if he wants to be a top-level outside zone offensive lineman, offensive tackle specifically, then, needs to be able to spill that guy over without losing his balance and preventing him from getting back inside to seal it. And then other one I got for Paul here, and I'm not sure exactly what happened on this, whether Paul just fell asleep with what he's looking, but this is just a outside zone to the right play action. And, the idea here is that basically everything down here gets washed out. You typically have, one unblocked defender here. And so from the initial lineup, Paul wouldn't be looking at this guy. He'd be looking down here more, right? But as everybody starts shifting over, then Paul should be aware of that. And you can see that he kind of is there, but I don't know if he's, just late thinking about this guy or what, but there's no reason that Paul should need to be able to get beat to the inside there. And Tua gets the ball out here. And you have some other issues on the play too, but, grading individual players, individual plays, this is a situation where, Paul needs to be able to step down the same way that everybody else in the offensive line is here and to, basically get his head in front and just wash him down into everybody else. And that doesn't happen on this play. All right, next graded player. So we're going to have Rob Jones here coming in at an 8.25, and his overall grade or his average grade has been on a slow climb up. This is the fourth game in a row that he's, been in this range of the 8.25 to 8.5 range, which is, when we talk about the makeup of this offense where you want those two stud tackles, you want that athletic center and two guards that you can get by with. This is about where you want to see your guards, right? And that's where Rob Jones has been after a rough start to the season. So I think that, he's been playing to the expectation that I had for him at the beginning of this season. I think there's still potential for him in this scheme in the future. Not a player that is beyond being upgraded, but also, we start talking about the stuff that needs to happen in the offseason. I don't think that Rob Jones is one of those that I look at and I say, we have to upgrade this position. And that's not to say that Rob Jones is a perfect player, right? That's why he's not grading up in the 9 range, right? And this is another example of the Texans being able to dictate protection and making Miami make a choice here, right? So with this alignment here, Patrick Paul has to set to this guy out here. Rob Jones has to set to the defender over Paul. And Brewer has to set here, right? Well, it doesn't have to, but you're creating a situation where you have to decide either Liam Eichenberg can help Jackson Carman, or we can slide to the left, right? But then you're leaving Carman on an island. So what do you really want to do there? Neither option's great. What the Dolphins end up doing is they leave Brewer one-on-one here. They leave Eichenberg, without somebody to block so that he can help out here with Carman. You can see his eyes peeking out here. But the result of that is that you kind of leave Jones on an island, right? Jones is not a player that's ever going to be great in space, but by Paul having to set wider, right, and this defender staying to the inside of Brewer, you're creating, you know, a big area that Jones has to defend and kind of gives the defender a two-way go. And as you can see here, Jones does not do a great job of being able to adjust that inside move. I think that he was setting up thinking that, with this defender already to the outside, that he was going to, try to basically beat him around the edge as a guard, and that's not what happens. He goes to the inside. Jones does not have the foot and the hip speed to flip around, and that's what ends up, creating that scenario. But again, this comes down to personnel where the Dolphins have to decide which way they're helping. Are they going to send Brewer over here to help Jones and put Eichenberg on the nose here, leaving Carman on an island, or are they going to give Carman a little bit of help, meaning that the other guys have to be on an island? In this case, they choose to leave Brewer, Jones, and Paul on an island, and Jones fails in this scenario. Next one for Jones, same idea here, right? So looking at this, you have to slide to the right, right? Brewer has to go to 39 if he comes. Eichenberg, Carman, meaning that you're over here on an island. Guys way out here, so Paul's going to have to set wide. And again, we're looking at getting Jones on an island, which is where we don't want him to be in pass protection. So right away, look at all the green grass that Paul has to cover, or that Jones has to cover. And, I don't think that Jones does an awful job here, right? He wraps him up. Not going to, get that call. That's something we talk about every week, that hand does not automatically mean a hold. But, we've got a solid pocket here. And when Tua leaves is where he just doesn't let go. So, this was a holding penalty, but I wouldn't call this a complete loss. And, I would say it's somewhat unlucky that a holding penalty gets called, and it wasn't just an awful play by Jones. It was more so a coverage issue in the sense the ball couldn't get out on time. The plays extended a little bit, and Tua is doing a solid job of finding an escape lane, extending that play, and Jones just hangs on a little bit too long in that scenario. And that brings us to our highest graded player of this week, and that's going to be Aaron Brewer. It comes in an 8.31, and as you can see, that is still below his season average and also below the offensive line's season average. So we didn't have a single offensive lineman that was individually above the team average for the season. And this is nothing against Brewer. Brewer has been playing well. I do feel like there's been a little bit of a drop-off, and we'll see that when we look at the graph here in a little bit, the past few weeks, where, towards the beginning of the season, we were seeing those, high 8s and, 9 level grades, but we really haven't gotten that. And again, that's not, I'm not going to sit here and say that, Brewer is playing bad, because he's not, but I do think that he has taken a step down from where he started out the season playing at a spectacular pace. All right, so as we get into the film for Brewer here, so this was going to be a screen pass to Jonnu, and as you can see here, like this one kind of stinks because, everything is setting up nicely here, and if Jonnu's able to catch this and get upfield, this is probably 6, right? But Brewer's not able to get the block there, and number 4 ends up making the play. Obviously, Brewer has had plenty of good reps doing this, putting guys on their ass, and being able to latch onto the block. But we try to talk about the good, but we've also got to bring up the bad also. And this was one of those scenarios where we're real close to having a touchdown play. We just need Brewer to make one final block there. Then on this one, so this is going to be a zone play to the right, and this one's tough because we're getting the combination block to the right here. Right, Carman's blocking the end. Eichenberg and Brewer are comboing. Brewer's going to look to climb up to number 48 here. And the problem here is that Brewer's combo block is so good that it not only knocks Eichenberg off balance, but also knocks the defender into Carman, ends up knocking the two players who essentially make the play free while Brewer climbs. So, again, this is, personnel type stuff that Brewer's making a great play here, but the consequence of making a great play is that we're, taking out two of our own linemen that, shouldn't really be in the starting lineup. And this one is just going to be about as unlucky as you can get. We're looking at a screen pass here again, and everything's looking good except for the fact that Brewer tackles Mostert. This team just has some wildly random stuff that happens, and when you have one of your best linemen peeling out on a screen and he's the one that tackles your running back, I don't know how you can chalk it up as to anything other than just unlucky in a situation like this. And then last one here that I have for Brewer, and the reason that I included this one, not necessarily a performance type thing, but I like the uniqueness of this blocking scheme. And we saw the Eagles doing some of this with Jason Kelce, and I've compared Brewer to Kelce in the past, but the Eagles used to run a power where they would pull Kelce and have him leading up through. In this case, it was more of a help for Carman in a way to get him out there. But I do think this is a concept to keep an eye on in the future to see if Miami will, use this in the run game to pull Brewer either leading up on power or, if they're able to seal that defensive end in, just continuing him around the edge. I think this is, when you talk about the elite athleticism that Brewer has as a center, this is the type of stuff that opens up. All right, so like I said, not a great week from the offensive line. No individual offensive lineman who graded above the season average. But that should have been expected based on the personnel that we had. We're going to flip over here to the graph that we've shared a few times when it's been relevant on this channel. I think is relevant again this week in the sense that we've talked in the past about how we got away from having these guys down here in those low sevens and below range, and we got two of those guys being Eichenberg and Carman. They're down in that range again this week, and we're losing those top level performances. Nobody in the high 8s or into the 9s, which is what we had earlier in the season. You can see that the orange line here, Aaron Brewer, like I talked about, we had those high level performances early in the season, and he's down here around a little above average these past several weeks. We really like to see him be able to pop back up into those high level performances. You can see that Robert Jones, we talked about, kind of had some of those uneven performances and has kind of leveled it out some, and the roller coaster that is Liam Eichenberg in that dark blue. This lower green one here is your Patrick Paul line, and a little up and down with him, which is to be expected, but not dropping way down. So I'm pleased with where he is in this season. As always, appreciate you guys watching. Feel free to leave a comment below. Come find me on X. Let's talk some more offensive line stuff at OL Coach Smith 63, and we'll talk again soon.